Welcome back to Season 2, Episode 4, WNBA Retrospect, a historical annual summer scouting series we do here at the Next in Locked On Women's Basketball, diving into the pre-draft film of WNBA legends. Today, we'll talk about Lindsay Whalen, who was a lottery pick in the '04 draft out of Minnesota. Whalen, five-time All-Star, four-time champion, including a second-place finish for MVP in 2008.
And the first Gopher.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hunter, come on, we're not in that much of a rush.
Lincoln?
The first Gopher to ever get a bobblehead as a college athlete.
That's a very specific accolade, and I love it.
Yeah, shout out to Richard Deitch's piece from 2004.
Welcome. You are Locked On Women's Basketball. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. My name is Cruse. I'm your Saturday host covering the WNBA Draft and Prospect Scouting. I'm joined by my co-hosts Adler and Lincoln Shafer. Covers the WNBA with a focus on player development in the game within the game. Lincoln also contributes to our WNBA Draft coverage here at Locked On Women's Basketball. So Lindsay Whalen, 5'8" guard out of Minnesota, '04 draft. The college stat profile. It's elite. Over her 4-year career, 20 points, 5 assists, 5 rebounds, 2 steals, 53% from the field, 58% from 2 as a 5'8" guard. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Also, 80% from the line. You wanted to do this episode. We had to go back in time, partially because we can't get to film right now.
Not technically back in time. The last episode we did was a fellow player from the same draft.
We did. Yeah.
Think about it. So yeah, Lindsay Whalen has a lot of legend attached to her name. I would assume most people who are, I shouldn't say most people, but a lot of people who are current college basketball fans, especially given the explosion of the popularity of today's game within recent years, probably haven't seen her at Minnesota, but with the legend attached to her name, have certainly heard of her exploits in college. Like you said, the stats are insane. What she did as an upperclassman, not upperclassman, but after her freshman year, which is an excellent freshman year by most standards, she put up 21 points. She put up 21 points, 5 rebounds, 5.5 assists, and over 2 steals, while shooting 60% from 2 and almost 36% from 3. On 30% usage with a 30% usage, 37% assist rate, and a sub 20% turnover rate. These are absolutely insane numbers. And she got to the line like crazy. These are things that humans don't usually do, especially in this time and era. We'll talk more about the following comp in a little bit, because I'm sure y'all thought similarly or will think similarly. But this is basically like if you imagine in 2004 pace, in 2004 scoring environment, this is just what Caitlin Clark would have been. Maybe if she wasn't as good from 3. Lincoln?
That did cross my mind while watching. Like, it's such a unique offensive profile.
Mm-hmm.
This kind of efficiency, this kind of production in multiple facets of the game. It is kind of in that Caitlin, almost Paige Becker's levels of production. It's some of the best offensive production I've ever seen from a college point guard. The efficiency is so crazy.
63% true shooting.
I had a question about that for y'all, trivia question here. So I want to compare how many players over the last 5 seasons have had a season where they shot 60% from 2 and had at least 5 assists, just like point guards. Do you know how many players did that?
In the last 5 years, it's like maximum 2.
Because I actually wrote an article about Paige this season, like establishing a 60 from 2, 40, 90 club, or 60, 40, 80 club. I think it's going to be 2 players, Paige and Whalen.
Paige didn't have average enough assist.
Really? What?
3.8.
Wow, that's way lower than I thought it'd be.
But the 2 players is Selena Lott from Marquette in 2019-20.
Oh my God, Selena Lott.
The other player is
Lindsay Whalen.
It's Lindsay Whalen.
Still on.
Over the last 5 years, it's
5 years.
It's the Drake guard, Katie.
Dinner beer.
Yeah,
It's pronounced dinner beer, but it's
Dinnerbeer.
she's a dinner beer.
It's literally just them two. If you lower the efficiency a little bit, it's like Caitlin, Sabrina. That's kind of it.
That's crazy.
Rachel Rose from Wofford.
Classic.
Yeah, it's an absurd statistical profile. You just don't see people with. Also, Lindsay Whalen. If you just went off highlights in this class, it's her and Taurasi like
neck and neck.
80 years ahead of everyone else in this class.
That too.
Like Lindsay Whalen's highlights per minute in terms of the passing in the open court. She's one of the best live dribble passers I've ever seen. The transition passing, she has multiple passes in the first 6 minutes of their Elite Eight run, in the Final Four run. The Elite Eight game and the Final Four game. There's multiple passes in the first 6 minutes where you're just like, how did she see that and how did that get through? And now her teammate's wide open for a layup. I don't understand how that just happened.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the things that that stood out the most to me about Lindsay. I mean, it should stand out the most because she's one of the most insane passers of all time. Like, the level of flashiness that she could do on her passes was absolutely ridiculous. She relied on that flashiness. I don't want to say she relied on it, but the fact that she could hit those, I think, made her a little too eager to try to hit them. You have these really high turnover numbers. She averages, honestly, I think, around 4 turnovers a game as both a junior and a senior, which, look, Caitlin Clark had almost 10 assists a game as a junior, senior, sophomore, whatever, and had, I think, similar turnover numbers, which is one thing. But Whalen was quote unquote only at around 5.5 assists, which is really a lot for 04. But she really goes for things that you don't want to be going for if you're, a lead point guard. We'll get to her W career, and these things do sort of, come out in the wash. But at least from a prospect perspective, it's not what you want to see at that age.
Yeah, I'd rather have somebody who's a little too loose with that than trying to get them to the passes that are becoming turnovers aren't swinging around to the wing. It's high leverage situations. It's creating 2 points almost every time.
Yeah, it's trying to go for a through pass, like through the entirety of the paint defense, where sometimes it hits and sometimes it's intercepted by the back line.
Yeah. Yeah, also noting, she loves going through on the baseline and never even looking at the rim. Yeah, she's gnashing a lot, never even looking at the rim and finding an open shooter. And the Minnesota shooters were moving well, lifting from the corner. And they knew her tendencies, and she knew where they were going to be at all times. The floor mapping, the processing is very good.
That's an understatement.
Yeah, very, very good. And I think I underestimated her first step.
Her first step is crazy.
Quick.
Yes. Her first step is absolutely crazy good. I honestly, despite the number of times she got to the rim and either drew a foul or finished, I couldn't really get a good handle on her last step. I think it was good enough, but not necessarily something you would project to be a high level W scorer. Sort of in that way, I should say. The foul drawing was absolutely insane. She, without necessarily being a Skylar Diggins-Smith level of borderline grifter, she just had this ability to get into the teeth of a defense and actually go for a finish while being just whacked at and thwacked at. And this translates. This translates hard. We've seen this year after year after year. But yeah, I mean, with what you're saying about the first step, she was unbelievably explosive off the catch or off the dribble. If she got a slight advantage over the point of attack defender, she was instantly at the rim. There was no way to stop her. There were a couple times I think starting off where I was like, all right, she's got a decent handle. She's navigating through traffic, and then you just watch longer, and she starts chaining some like unbelievable cross, like hang crosser spins, and it's like there is not a player, there just was not a player in WNBA history who could do what she was doing except like Dawn in her prime, and by this point Dawn's 29 or 30.
Yeah, exceptional command of the ball. And the last thing was that like the foul drawing, it comes from I think the same thing that makes her not a terrible defender, which is that she is not afraid of anyone or running into anything.
Oh yeah, and that court mapping you were talking about, she has, I would say she has one of the best, if not like top 3, like processing speed of anyone I've ever watched, and that includes current prospects. Like she constantly is manipulating every single defender on the court in a way that is again super rare for college players, even today. But the way that she is able to, I don't know if she necessarily has the same level of like instant mapping in her head that we see Paige does, but the speed with which she reacts to everything and can do anything as a result is truly insane.
So after the break, we'll continue to talk a little bit more about her prospect profile, the defense, and more. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and the lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Game Time offers priority last-minute deals where you can save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, and theater. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. If you didn't know already, Locked On Sports Today brings can't-miss analysis, opinions, news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We've talked a little bit about the offense. As a shooter, where are y'all at on just the profile?
Okay, this
general?
is actually exactly what I was hoping we would get to. Because, when we get to her W career, like this is the thing that I think is the biggest difference between basically Lindsay Whalen and Caitlin Clark. But like I was saying, in college, she's hitting 35%, as an upperclassman or, as a sophomore plus upperclassman, she's hitting 35% of a lot of threes a game. It's like 5.5
threes per game.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it's 3.3
in terms of average, like makes.
Yeah. In terms of threes per game attempts.
Sure. Either way, it's a very healthy volume. She's hitting a lot of them,
Yes.
and most of these are just not open catch and shoots. These are genuine pull-up threes. She's got insane range on them too. For that era, she's taking these from like halfway to the logo out of a pick and roll. Like she's not afraid to do them. And from my looking at her form, she's got a super stable upper body mechanics on them. She doesn't need a whole lot of airspace. Her footwork's real solid. From looking at these, I would project her to be a very, very solid pull-up three-point shooter at the next level.
The announcers love talking about her arc, though. They're like, oh.
That one's so high in the air.
This is what I miss by listening to them on mute.
Yeah, it's very fun. In the Final Four game, they have Doris Burke and Mark Jones as the sideline reporters, which is now like the ESPN One broadcast.
The crew they had for that game.
It's like we're scouting like prospects, but it's like actual announcers.
Yeah.
We're scouting announcers now.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fun game because they would say whatever on those 2004 broadcasts. We had I believe there was a full-throated voicing from Ann Myers that President Bush had told her that he would be watching this game. She said that on the broadcast, which is fascinating. But that Minnesota team is very interesting. There's a lot of off-ball movement, which is something that you're gonna do when you have Lindsay Whalen and Janelle McCarville, and they're just tearing people up in transition. They're getting a layup every single transition possession.
Moving to the defense, where are we at on just the scout in general?
Surprised. I'll leave it to Lincoln, but I was surprised.
She's scrappy, I would say, as a defender. She is very strong. She's guarding up. She's switching a lot, and she's quick enough. I do question off of this film whether she can defend the point of attack at the WNBA level, but she is certainly not a disaster defender. She's not bad.
Right, like you don't run into solid defenders of this usage level, and certainly not of this position and usage level, basically ever. I was surprised by the level of sort of scanning and awareness on as like a backside off-ball team defender. She's pretty solid at that. She's pretty solid against the sort of lower level drivers in ISO, sort of navigating the screen. She's very good at chasing through ball screens for someone who you're relegating to a chaser role, which I think portends well. This is again someone who I think maybe even to a slightly easier extent than Caitlin Clark because of this time period. You could say we're gonna stick her at the chaser role, and we're probably not going to have too much problem with that at the W level, just given I think it translates, especially like she was holding up perfectly fine against UConn.
Yeah, that's completely fair.
Yeah.
The only thing for me was she did get backdoored a couple times in that game.
Yeah, she has a tendency. She really had a tendency to at least 2 or 3 times a game to jump the passing lane on just like a swing pass and then get backdoored.
Which is how you want 2.5 steals a game, but it's also how you give up 4 layups a game. But yeah,
college guards
good enough
every time. College guards every time.
Moving to our grade, Lincoln, what would you go with for her grade as if she was her retro scouting report, not where we'd have her in the modern game?
It's hard to watch this tape and not just immediately think that this is an all-star, all WNBA level point guard.
Mm-hmm.
I have somewhere around a soft 70, so like a fringe all WNBA player, a consistent all-star. But the offense by itself is like almost MVP level. It's a 70 plus, almost an 80.
Yep. I would, offense for me is an 8, or a soft 8, at least in this point in time. Today, I would be giving her a hard 6, probably. I think there would be not more questions, but certainly at that height with only average finishing, we would certainly be a little more concerned about the translation against modern defenses. But given, what defenses were back then, and given, and especially given what it meant to be a point guard back then in the league, like Sue Bird was the first quote unquote scoring point guard in the league, and Lindsay Whalen is just a whole nother goddamn level. A hard 7 for me, easy, or not a hard 7, but just like a bang on 7 for me, easy. Hunter?
Yeah, 7. I think 7's like the answer there.
Great.
It's just interesting watching old point guard tape because we know these are the best point guards ever. There's just there's so few of them that it's super interesting.
Speaking of the best point guards ever, after the break, it's my time to shine.
We'll talk about
actually it's Lincoln's time, and then my time.
We'll talk about Lindsay Whalen's WNBA career. We'll also talk about some trivia as well. That'll tie into this as well.
I hope so.
As the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games and the sports stop sporting like we want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers a booster bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone, every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. All right, to kick off segment 3, Lindsay Whalen's WNBA career. Lincoln.
I'm told she was very good. Yeah.
You just don't see rookies come in and play the way she does. I mean, just to start off, You have her come in, and we have a pre-breakout Katie. I shouldn't say pre-breakout, but pre-making the leap Katie Douglas. We talked about this a couple weeks ago. You have Nikisha Sales in not quite the twilight of her career because she's sort of in her late 20s, but Nikisha Sales, who was a very solid off-ball scoring wing. You have Asia Jones, Taj Franklin. There's a lot of like really good ancillary pieces here that don't do particularly well together. They do well together. You have Mike Tebow, but it's not something that you look at and you say contender on paper. Lindsay Whalen comes in as a first-year player and as a second-year player. She leads them to the finals both years. They come, I believe, within one game of the finals. In fact, like 5 points, I think, of beating the Monarchs in 05, if I remember the structure of the playoffs correctly.
When she doubles her scoring average from the regular season her rookie year to the playoffs her rookie year.
Yeah.
She goes from like a 9-point per game scorer to 16.
Yes. On her usage level, like this just happens throughout her entire tenure in Connecticut.
Yeah.
She never takes a step back. She only gets better. The turnovers cut down a little. Well, she does take a step back in one aspect, but the turnovers cut down. She gets even better at getting to the rim and getting comfortable there. She gets a little bit better, working on some cuts off the ball, but it doesn't really matter given her usage rate. But they do kind of experiment, at least Mike does, with the level of Katie Douglas's playmaking, even sort of quote unquote out of position at the 2, with having some solid backup point guards. He likes to play her alongside Jamie Carey from Stanford/Texas a little bit to get more shooting, and they have this sort of dynamic that allows Katie to get her own, that allows Nikisha Sales to be handling the ball a lot. Asia Jones handles like 20-25% usage rate as like a backup post, which is super weird, but like it just works because Whalen doesn't need to have the ball in her hands all the time, but when she does, it's absolutely insane, and she's generating a paint touch within 4 seconds. And you just see her making the kind of passes that, like, she's the only player in the W for basically the entirety of her prime, other than like at some points Becky Hammon, who was making these passes. And that's no slight to like Sue. Sue's just a different kind of point guard who doesn't need to like get a paint touch and then kick out to create an open three. She just sort of like hits the hockey assist, and that works.
Yeah, that's what Whalen Jackson is for.
Exactly. But the setup here, there is one thing I think that prevents her basically from, like, at least in my eyes, being in 8 in Connecticut. She's very borderline 8. Like you said, the second place finished MVP. She finished like 5th in another MVP race on like 08 or something. The 3-point shooting just backs up. So from I believe her second year at Minnesota through her like second or third season in the W, she takes something like 355 threes, and she hits them at a near 36% clip. For basically the rest of her WNBA career, she hits under 30% from 3 on like 400 something threes. And this is despite the fact that, like, at this point, the 3-point line doesn't move. It moves back the year before she gets the W, and then it moves back after she's already in Minnesota. Like, it just backs up for reasons I cannot figure out. It just, I don't get it. But anyway.
I do have a trivia question related to this, because I was just blown out of my mind. Wow. In 2006, 90% from the line, and she shot 12.9% from 3 on 1.9 attempts. Do you know how many players in league history have shot 85% from the line in a season and less than 20% from 3 on at least 1 attempt per game?
Maybe 4.
3?
One other player besides Whalen.
Do we know her?
Is it a big?
Yeah, it's a we've done a retrospect on her in this.
It sounds like Candace.
Nope, not Candace.
We've shot 87% from the line.
Oh, that's a good point.
Done a retrospect.
Tying it all together.
From 3.
Oh, wait, Elena Beard?
It's not Lana Beard.
Holtzclaw.
It's Holtzclaw.
Oh God, Jesus.
Yeah.
The only 2 players. I don't understand how she.
I understand how Holtzclaw couldn't hit threes. I don't understand how Whalen couldn't.
No, I don't want.
That means that we are at a 100% hit rate on players that are great free throw shooters and terrible 3-point shooters. It's the new marketing efficiency.
She just stopped shooting them.
Well, she stopped shooting them because she wasn't good at them. Like, Like the accuracy backs up, and then she stops taking them. Like this is the key in Minnesota.
But
like,
no, but it's so weird though because she was such a good shooter in college.
that's what I'm saying. It just
The
backs
shot
up,
is
and so she
a
stops
little
taking them
funky.
because she's not good at them. But she was always a really, really damn good long mid-range shooter throughout the entirety of her W career. That never backs up. It's always like 42% at the worst.
Shout out
like
Sean
39%
Livingston.
given year.
That means
Exactly.
That means it's probably mental, honestly.
Yeah.
Well, probably, but the thing is, Cheryl worked with her tirelessly basically every offseason on trying to do this. You see this with Rebecca Brunson. Rebecca Brunson's last 2 years in the W, she just starts
true.
taking threes and she hits 37% of them as a 35 and 36-year-old. They're trying the same thing with Whalen. It doesn't work, and I don't understand how that backs up. If it didn't, when she gets to Minnesota and she plays a lot of years sort of in what I would call the post prime sort of twilight of her career, she's not generating paint touches quite at will, but she's still great. She's not doing the same kind of insane primary playmaking, but she's still a great passer and table setter in Minnesota. No, if she has that 3-point shooting, I think we're talking about an even different level of dynasty in Minnesota. But yeah, it's insane what she did and how long she's able to last, even as just a very good point guard who did not have what she did in Connecticut that made her an MVP. Given that point, Lincoln, do you want to talk about why she went 4th in the draft? Actually, before we say that, so if Hunter, what was the grade you would have put on her? I don't think we got that.
7?
You said 7, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
7.
so we all have her second in the class, correct?
Yeah, because we had Beard as a pretty solid 60.
Yeah, so that's by a full grade.
Yeah.
I know why Elena Beard would have gone over her.
She's one of the most decorated college players of all time.
But it's also clear based on our knowledge now, watching Beard, that I don't think it's a huge, difficult question. And I say this as someone who's a big dookie.
Yeah, so Whalen was very open about wanting to stay in Minnesota throughout her whole college career. She's from a small town in Minnesota. She's a Minnesota legend, the first Gopher to ever get a bobblehead, as I said earlier. She's very, very open about wanting to be close to home. She doesn't leave the state until she's in college, basically. And then, so she's very open about wanting to be in Minnesota, wanting to play for the Lynx. And the Lynx tried really hard to get up high enough to draft her because it was pretty much consensus among mock drafts at the time, between people like Vopel at ESPN and Rebecca Lobo working for the WNBA, that the top 4 was pretty much set in order: Taurasi, Beard, Nicole Powell, and then Whalen 4 to Connecticut. So Minnesota ends up trading up to number 6 is as high as they can get. And then they're talking to both Charlotte at 3 and Connecticut at 4 to try to trade up. And teams are asking for picks 6 and 7 and at least another starter. And that's what it's going to take to move up. And the general manager at the time, Griffith, says, yeah, we can't trade 4 starters for 1. That's just not a feasible way to build a good team. And, it works out for them because in 2010, she's just like, okay, send me home. And ends up back in Minnesota anyway.
That's basically the way that Connecticut, their streak ends, is like the 3rd best player on those teams, Taj McWilliams Franklin, is like, yeah, it's fun playing in Uncasville, but I kind of want out in the trial of my as I'm getting into my mid-30s, and she gets shipped to LA, and then a couple years later, Katie Douglas is like, can I go home? She moves to Indiana. A couple years later, Whalen, I would like to go back to Minnesota. She moves out too. It's funny how that fell apart for as good as they were, but that's what you get for playing in Uncasville. This happens literally every 6 or 7 years. This is how it works. But yeah, the Lynx. Oh, sorry.
That's why they just have to draft UConn players.
It works. But yeah, the Lynx would have been way better off trading those picks, obviously. But yeah, before I hit my heart out and have to do with this, I did watch Nicole Powell tape, to be clear. And I'm deranged. And they look, you can see why you would take Nicole Powell over Lindsay Whalen, just if you watched at the right moments. Nicole Powell is basically what if you had Katie Douglas, but just she couldn't really do everything Katie Douglas did at the same time. But there are issues. Nicole Powell, there are issues that we know, and the three of us know to look for. But we can't. But I don't think just anyone had this top of mind back then. Nicole Powell was really good at getting to the rim, but only mid at drawing fouls, and was a very poor finisher. Her shoulders were super unstable on mid-range shots. But you have these sort of other skills that kind of outweigh them, at least at the college level, and help at the WNBA level. She's one of the best wings at moving without the ball, basically over the first 20 years of when the drafts existed, and she just creates shots all the time. She's explosive off the catch. She's versatile defensively. She was a really good W player. She's maybe the third best wing in the W for most of her prime. She's arguably the second best player on a title team in her sophomore year. It's not a bad pick, but it's not Whalen.
So Charlotte's front office thought that she was a primary ball handler. They are on the record as saying that they thought that Nicole Powell could be WNBA Magic Johnson. So if you think that, then it's I guess reasonable. But if she's just going to end up being a really solid wing, it's a little bit different.
WNBA Magic Johnson.
Yeah, that's what the Charlotte front office said on the record after the draft. So, it is what it is.
Thanks for Thoughts on Basketball, your first listen every day. Join us by the next week for continued coverage of the WNBA and historical scouting reports like we have on this podcast platform. Make your second listen Locked On Sports Today, the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Have a great rest of your weekend, everyone.